Uh, right after Netanyahu's UN speech today, Trump said a few words, and we're going to talk about that on the reality show. But among the words that came out of his mouth was something like, "We're going to have peace." The word peace actually uh, came up in him talking about a ceasefire that he's apparently planning to force on Israel. Well, how do you get peace in the Middle East? By bringing back somebody who's already done it before. Tony Blair is back in the conversation. Uh, the former Middle East peace envoy of the Quartet. I don't know if that's still a thing. The Quartet, the US, UN, European Union, and Russia. Because everything's better when you run it by committee. And when you form a committee, who do you want on that committee more than the UN, EU, and Russia? So, yeah, he was doing that until about 10 years ago, and now he's back. Tony Blair is being discussed as the head of whatever transitional government is going to exist in Gaza after the war. There's a lot to unpack just in that idea alone. After the war, it kind of implies that if a ceasefire is forced on Israel, that's the end of the war, rather than what the Palestinians have said it is, which is a pause until they can do October 7th again and again until there are no more Jews left to kill. Uh, so there's that part. The idea that it's transitional is, of course, suggests that following, a few years of Blair, you would have some sort of super peaceful um, population in Gaza that would really want peace. Um, and yeah, so we're gonna talk about this new idea, new old idea of Tony Blair bringing back peace to the Middle East as he has done over the past few decades. Welcome to the Daily Objective. I'm Razi Ginsburg. I'm joined by Daniel Kraus. Daniel, you're too young to remember all the great times we've had with Tony Blair, and I say that very sarcastically before we get into the Razi likes Tony Blair stuff, which I'm gonna address at some point. But yeah.
No, I was at the edge of my seat when the Iraq war started, and I was, 1 year old. But I mean, so this new thing that is supposed to be set up, the Gaza International Transitional Authority, which again, there's nothing more permanent than a temporary transitional authority. Look at the Palestinian Authority, which is also supposed to be transitional. Uh, so, I mean, it's the same thing again, and there's so many things that are going on here at the same time. I mean, yeah, the fact that I haven't heard from Tony Blair in a while, but yeah, he sort of was involved in the Middle East for of course, while he was prime minister, but even afterwards, he was still dealing with issues. I believe even back in 2019, there was some talking about sort of some reconciliation between Gaza and the Palestinian Authority, and he played a role in that. And now he's playing a role here. When it comes to sort of him being the head of, well, okay, I mean, when do we even start? Well, I think the most important thing is, they are talking about the ceasefire. Hamas is still there. Like, Hamas didn't disappear. Hamas still has to be dealt with. The idea is that with this transitional authority, Hamas has no role. Hamas will be disarmed. Even Keir Starmer said that his vision of two-state solution is without Hamas, or that's the two-state solution is not the vision of Hamas. So everybody sort of accepts it. Everybody sort of like predicts that Israel will take care of Hamas while trying to stop Israel from taking care of Hamas at every single opportunity. And then we can sweep in and do this new authority and then give it back to the Palestinian Authority that had it in the past so they could lose it again. Or even if they keep it, it's not that much of a benefit. So yeah, I mean, it's another thing. It's another terrible thing. I think the big story here is the fact that Tony Blair was apparently given this I don't know what to call it, like authority or ability to negotiate these things from Trump. and it looks like Trump is largely behind this plan. Later, we can talk about deportations as well, and yeah, so I think that's the scariest thing right now. The fact that Trump seems to be behind it. Even if you take the recent things of Trump saying that there will be no annexation of West Bank, we can bring it up and we can talk about what did he mean exactly by that. But it does seem that Trump basically wants the end of this.
Yeah, yeah, and I expect we're going to be talking about it a lot in the coming days, especially after Monday's meeting between Trump and Netanyahu. And of course, we will talk about it on the reality show. But I want to go back to a bit to Tony Blair's history when it comes to the Middle East and not necessarily Israel and the so-called Palestinians, but back to 2001 after 9/11, when Tony Blair immediately made sure he positions himself as Bush's right-hand man, so to speak, his guy in Europe, his the Britain was kind of the first country to join the US, the one that stuck with it the whole way. That's how it's remembered. That's why this was frowned upon in this country. By the way, as a side note, to understand how disgusting the reaction to 9/11 was in the UK. Go and watch BBC's Question Time, which is this main political show every Thursday, and it has usually one member from each of the three largest parties, or the two largest parties, and then another party, and then a journalist that's sort of from the right and a journalist that's sort of from the left. It's supposed to be kind of fair and balanced, if you will. Uh, Go watch what that show was like on September 13th, 2001, 2 days after 9/11, with the US ambassador to the UK there. It really is disgusting. Do not watch this with a meal. Yeah, watch this. Watch this when you're fasting, because it's despicable. In the UK, the reaction was immediately, America kind of deserves it because they're mean to these savages. It's not a surprise when you see the people who are supporting the Palestinians. It would be less of a surprise if you look back at the reaction to 9/11. So Tony Blair was perceived as a guy who's kind of going to do whatever Bush says, and was hated for it, although reelected despite that. And um, that was not necessarily the case. I certainly didn't see it that way. So I have this quote from Tony Blair from September 14th, 2001, in the House of Commons. He said, "I suggest that any response should be based on clear and unequivocal intelligence, that it must not be disproportionate, and that it must be consistent with the principles of international law." Tony Blair immediately went in to make sure that Bush doesn't give the terrorists what they deserve. And it's important to remember, like, right after 9/11, it wasn't clear what America would do. People still thought that America was what it was in 1941 when it was attacked, and would do anything to destroy its enemies. Bush pretty soon made it clear that was not the case, but very much influenced by Tony Blair. Some of the targets we've spoken on this channel, how the first two targets, obvious targets, should have been Iran and Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia was immediately considered an ally. Pakistan was kind of threatened, but also given an out, which they took. Afghanistan was also given an out, which they didn't take. The Taliban in Afghanistan. So and again, the U.S. response was absolutely pathetic. They took the easiest country to build a coalition around, and then they went after the second easiest country to build a coalition around. People don't remember, but Iraq was kind of a semi-consensus, with the exception of France, whose president had some dealings in Iraq that he didn't want exposed, which ended up exposed. So that was the situation back then. The talk about it perhaps being Iran, nobody talked about Saudi Arabia, was very quickly dismissed and thrown out by the British government, Tony Blair's government, and his Foreign Secretary Jack Straw. So, yeah, people, the loudest people often are the ones who rewrite history, but this was the history. Tony Blair saved the worst elements in the Middle East from American retribution and retaliation.
Yeah, I mean, generally the response to 9/11 and generally the response we always have to terrorism is just bad. We just do not do what is necessary. We've never done what was necessary about Iran. I mean, you said about that it wasn't sure what would happen after 9/11, but once the American hostages were taken in Iran and nothing happened, and then there were failed operations trying to save them, uh, I, I could do the quote from Ayn Rand, right? Like we would never live it down, and we never did. We are still suffering the consequences of not reacting to Iran. This is always what happens. That's why it's problematic. Even when you talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and people want some sort of like perfect solution, but we failed so much when it comes to standing up to evil, when it means or when we need to stand by certain principles, then yeah, right now it's gonna be messy. It's not gonna be nice. It might mean a complete deportation of Palestinians because, again, once a population, and this is not unique to Palestinians. Let's, we have the other conflict, Ukrainian-Russian conflict. Let's say Ukraine, it's unfortunately, it's not likely. But let's say Ukraine manages to retake Crimea, Donetsk, and Luhansk. It should deport a bunch of people. Those, especially in Donetsk and Luhansk, those people stood up to the Ukrainian government back in 2014, chose to join a foreign nation to attack its own country. So absolutely, if Ukraine manages to take it back, it should deport some people. Same thing happened with the Germans after World War II. Same thing happened with the Japanese after World War II. Once a population decides to, we will try and take out this government or this whole country, basically, we will join a foreign nation. This is what it means. We are still, and maybe I'm going a little bit into Netanyahu's speech, who acknowledged this, and then we try to act as if now we need to set up a government for Palestinians. We need to give them right to self-determination, or we need to give it back to the Palestinian Authority, and then demand of Palestinian Authority to hold elections like we did back in the day. What do you think will happen? So again, like having proper philosophy, having proper ideas on how to wage a war is important. I mean, even if you just talk about Iraq, the fact that, yeah, okay, we took out Hussein's regime and then we were like, all right, what now? We had no idea what to do. And that was what screwed up. Not to mention even the fact that, there was no reason. Oh, somewhat of a reason to go after Iraq, but not more than to go after, as you said, Saudi Arabia, and much more importantly, Iran.
Well, you mentioned it, so I will read it. This is from um, what's that place where she was speaking called? Anyway, uh,
Who?
was it the Ford Hall Forum? Actually, I'm not sure.
Oh,
Anyway,
I'm not sure.
this
Probably,
is
but I'm
this
not
is
sure.
an answer Ayn Rand gave to a question in 1980. This is the question. Um, no, it's not from the Ford Hall Forum. What should be the U.S. policy in the Iranian crisis? How should we get the hostages back? And this is her answer. Never to allow the country to get into that situation. It's certainly the fault of our foreign policy, and at present, there is no right course of action. It's too late. If we didn't march with force the first or second day after the hostages were taken, nothing we do after that will be any good, and it will take us years to live it down. This was in 1980. We are now 45 years later, not only nowhere near living it down, but doubling down on that policy of negotiating with terrorists, of imagining that all they want is, to live a peaceful life, and if we just stop being mean to them. And that's the idea behind this, whatever this new initiative putting Tony Blair there is all about. Tony Blair again was the peace envoy to the Middle East from 2007 to 2015. In 2008, he presented his peace plan. Peace plans are presented day and night when it comes to Israel and the Palestinians. The Palestinians don't want peace. They've never wanted peace. That is what Palestinianism is. It's about exterminating the Jews. And again, we repeat this often, but they don't actually necessarily want a state. That is that is the way this is the message is delivered and translated into English and for Western ears. But what they want and what they say they want, every organization, every leader, their textbooks all say all they want is to kill all the Jews. And by pretending that, if we just find some sort of middle ground, there can be peace. First of all, it is absolutely dishonest and evil because they know, people like Tony Blair know that this will result in more deaths. Um, the question is when and and how many.
Yeah, I mean, sort of going back to the plan to this transitional body. So, at least from what we know, and we don't know that much yet. Basically, as I've said, it will be this transitional body that would handle it. It would be under UN or with the cooperation of the UN and the Gulf states, and then eventually be turned over to the Palestinian Authority, with the Palestinian Authority. Role in this transitional body would be pretty much very minimal, sort of just oversight in a way. They wouldn't have any direct role. Now, something that was brought up is when it comes to deportation, since Trump did talk about it somewhat in the past, that possibly, I mean, there were many places that were recommended in the past, or sort of where possible. Now it seems like he's going away from it, and even I think Tony Blair has talked about that there's not going to be any involuntary displacement, and even for people who want to leave voluntarily, there's going to be establishment of some property rights preservation unit where basically if anybody does leave, they would still hold their right of return and sort of right to property if they ever decide to come back. So again, like what kind of property rights are we talking about in Gaza, and what this is the biggest problem. Like we cannot do the you cannot ever find a solution to something you do not recognize the nature of. And the fact is, Palestinians want violence. I mean, you mentioned this two-state solution. Two-state solution is not what Palestinians want. Even if you look at the polls, it's not something Palestinians would want. And the only way to get them to get majority of Palestinians to agree with the with the two-state solution is according to 67 borders, which again is like an completely unrealistic idea. And even to that, they had a chance and they refused to in the past. But when you go to that, uh, again, we are still trying to deal, and this is the same with anything. If you have organizations, if you set up some institutions that are supposed to work within the Palestinian framework, let's say their own elections, UNRWA being, employed by Gazans, being employed by Palestinians, them setting their own welfare systems. Well, what we've seen is every single aspect of that is being used for terrorism. Welfare system means they are paying people who kill Jews. When it comes to education, it means they are educating their children into hating Jews and wanting to kill them. When we talk about elections, they elect these groups that support it. They elect Islamist, either like Islamist terrorist groups or secular terrorist groups, somewhat secular terrorist group. So, like you cannot say that Palestinians simply want peace. They simply want uh, peaceful transfer to a two-state solution, because if you believe in that, then yeah, the idea is just give them sort of right to self-determination, but that's not what they are.
Thank you, Bonnie, for the super chat. Thank you, Bonnie, for another super chat. I let me quickly address this whole Razi likes Tony Blair stuff, which I already see in the
I said
chat from
nothing.
Akira and comes up often. The point that I make in the context of Tony Blair is not any praise of him. Tony Blair is absolutely evil. It is a point about the conservative government that followed after the 2 years that Gordon Brown was in power. The conservatives were in power for 14 years in this country. Gordon Brown for two, Tony Blair for 10 years before that. In the 10 years before that, on every metric, pretty much, the government was less restrictive, more free market, let's say, than the conservative government. VAT, the British equivalent of a sales tax, was lower. Uh, Corporate tax, the conservatives' parting gift for this country was an insane 33% overnight rise in corporation tax. Income tax was 40% at the highest marginal level under Tony Blair, and the conservatives raised it. Now, just to make clear that point, Gordon Brown raised it right before leaving office because of the financial crisis. And he raised it as an emergency measure for 1 year. Now we know what emergency measures are, but he raised it from 40 to 50% as a 1 year emergency measure. After that year was over, the conservatives decided to cut it to 45%, and of course were accused of cutting taxes for the rich, even though they were raising taxes, and you don't have to be rich to be at that threshold. And it has stayed there the whole time. Liz Truss, when she came into office 12 years after the conservatives came into office, tried to cut it, and the conservatives got rid of her immediately in historical speed because in large part of that and a bunch of other things that would have made Britain about as economically free as it was under Tony Blair. So, yeah, my so-called support for Tony Blair is absolutely not that. It is a criticism of the conservatives who deserve to lose. Now, on this issue, David Cameron, I remember the morning of was it June 24th, 2016, when when first of all, the Brexit vote, the results came in and it was clear that Britain is leaving the European Union. And then even more good news that David Cameron was resigning from his role. I thought that was the last we'll ever see of him. But of course, after the Conservatives got rid of Liz Truss, and the Conservative MPs members of Parliament got rid of Liz Truss and put Rishi Sunak in her place, he brought back David Cameron as Foreign Secretary. And David Cameron was suggesting after October 7th, already suggesting that Britain should recognize a Palestinian state. He was already attacking Israel for its half-assed response to October 7th. So, yeah, the Labour may be an enemy of freedom, but the conservatives are definitely not friends of freedom and definitely not friends of Israel.
Yeah, I mean, just on that, there was like a brief era in like 90s and early 2000s when you sort of had this. I mean, in labor, I don't remember what was the name. Was it like blue labor or sort of like business labor or something? It was like a specific part of labor that was this like less bad, let's say. And in America, you had Bill Clinton saying, the era of big government is over. So you had this like brief window of like weird sort of left wing. Um, I don't want to say like free market thing, but sort of more like fiscally responsible thing. So that was an interesting era. I wish I was there, but I wasn't. Uh, eh, so yeah, I mean, going back to this and ending with it. So maybe you want Tony Blair to go back into domestic politics in the UK. Wh-
No, I mean, look, first of all, if Tony Blair came back, as Prime Minister of the UK, I'm sure he would not, cut taxes to where they were before. He would fit into whatever, the culture demands now. But yeah, Tony Blair, remember, he came into office, what, 6 years after Thatcher left. Britain was still better off than it is now. And even if you wanted to change things for the worse, you needed to be careful about it. Whereas I guess the conservatives, uh, there was time between their previous government, which wasn't Thatcher, and it was John Major who was not good, and when they came back in 2010, that yeah, they felt free to be the you know mixed economy leaning socialists that they are.
Yeah, so I guess sort of starting wrapping up in this, we'll have to see where we even go with this, but I still have no idea how they are planning to what is it, bridge the gap or sort of jump over the gap. The fact that like Hamas is still there, even if you make a ceasefire with Hamas, I don't think Hamas would. I don't think. Well, ignore Hamas. Palestinians don't want Hamas disarmed. Palestinians themselves, in the poll, have said that they do not want to see disarmed Hamas. So I still have no idea how they are planning to bridge that gap. The idea that if there is a ceasefire, I mean, just think of what everything you need. You need to disarm Hamas, potentially expel all the leadership. Uh, I said disarm, release all the hostages. That would have to happen, right? Like you cannot have this transitional authority and hostages wouldn't be released, and idea and complete withdrawal of the IDF and establishment of that authority. That needs to happen in like one deal. I don't think you can. I have no idea how you could do this partially. I mean, you could do partial release of the hostages, but we did that in the past. It didn't bring it any closer to disarmament of Hamas. So it really does seem. I mean, yeah. If your idea is that you want to somehow negotiate Hamas out of existence, that's a losing starting point. I have no idea how you would ever get anything positive out of that. Not to mention the establishment of this transitional authority just to give it back to Palestinian Authority is not something positive to start with. Reminder: Palestinian Authority is still giving money to the families and people who killed Jews. This didn't stop, despite the promises that it would.
Yeah. Mahmoud Abbas gave his word, so I'm sure that's going to end any day now. Leo asks, are there any Arabs who take place in Ayn Rand Center UK stuff? Yeah, some of them have been on the channel as well. I think it's yeah, that's funny. That's my joke, by the way. But yeah, people on the podcast watch on YouTube so you can get it. Yeah, if half of Israeli Jews were as pro-Israel as the Arabs who participate in our events, Israel would live in peace and security now. But as we heard from its leader, it's not going to. We will be discussing that on today's episode of the reality show. Netanyahu's UN speech and yeah, well, just the speech. We have a lot to say about it, so we're gonna wrap it up here. Thanks, Daniel. Thanks everybody for watching. The reality show starts in a couple of minutes.